What's the most disturbing piece of audio there is? I can't remember which podcasts, but I think it was a psychology/brain science one. There was this girl who was being recorded in surgery for deep brain stimulation to treat her depression. She had completely debilitating depression her life, just felt like utter garbage every moment of every day. Anyway, they needed to try to find the part of her brain they could stimulate to make her feel better. They'd stimulate one spot, ask for her reaction, and then stimulate a nearby spot. Anyway, they hit the right spot and suddenly she felt okay for the first time in her life. Then the surgeon changed something, and you could hear in her voice like she was being sent back to hell. She said something like, "No, not there, that's the wrong spot, that's horrible," and the surgeon said, "I didn't move the probe to a new spot, I turned it off." She thought some new part of her brain was being stimulated and it was causing her to feel incredibly bad. But that wasn't what happened. The stimulator was stopped and she had returned to the same state she'd been in her whole life after a moment of escape from it. The 911 call of Loretta Pickard, a disabled elderly woman who died in a house fire. She was physically unable to get out of the house on her own. There were firefighters outside her house, but due to a miscommunication, they thought the house was empty. On the call, you hear the woman talking as the fire gets worse and she gets closer to death. Since other people are mentioning videos with horrible audio, that one of the nightclub burning down. The sounds of people screaming trying to get out of the crush and then burning to death is just awful. The worst parts are 1, at one point someone on fire is seen running out and, 2, how the screaming suddenly stops and it gets eerily quiet. There was another, shorter clip leaked from the call recording where you can hear some of the kids getting killed. It's quite short. But the FBI's transcript documenting the full call was released and that provides a timeline of the library casualties. Reading it is bad enough. 10 kids were killed in the library, 9 others were wounded. One of the kids was partially paralyzed and dragged himself to the windows a couple of hours after he was shot. He was in and out of consciousness during that time. He started to climb out of the window and was caught mid-air by the emergency crew. There's video footage. Brave kid. A lot of his injuries were a result of being shot while he was trying to administer first aid to his friend who died. The woman who helped build the case against Jared from Subway by recording him talking about his enjoyment of pedophilia. Listening to a couple minutes of him describing what he's done made me want to vomit. The process of getting this stuff on tape wrecked the woman's mental health, and it's easy to see why. That documentary was tough to get through. That woman proves how unstoppable a mom protecting children can be. Absolutely disgusting things, and she pushed through to help get the arrest made. True hero. The cult leader from the documentary Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, where he records his rape of a young girl in his secret room in which only the most devout followers are allowed. It's haunting. Well, I'm taking this out of my Netflix queue. I want to clarify, they do not play the whole thing. They only play a piece leading up to the rape. You do not have to hear that. But what they do play is still sickening. The 911 call of the woman whose chimp was eating her friend's face. Travis the monkey. My GF is obsessed with this story and it's actually nuts. He was often given Xanax in his morning tea to help calm him as he was naturally very agitated towards anyone who wasn't his owner. And on the day of the incident he saw his owner's friend remove her glasses and put her hair up, and that triggered him to go into a drug-fused rage where he didn't register pain or respond to his owner for a pretty big chunk of time due to the Xanax. He degloved the victim, as well as tore off her nose and ears and parts of her cheeks. Fucking terrible, all while his owner stabbed and beat him repeatedly. On top of being stabbed multiple times, he was also shot up to 15 times during the actual incident by cops and did not die till hours after the drugs from his tea wore off. Initially officers thought that the 911 call was a prank call too, so they hesitated on dispatching officers until other neighbors called as well. For me personally, it's audio and video. It's a grandmother who killed her son-in-law, and for some reason the police bring in the woman's young granddaughter/daughter of the victim. And the grandmother is insane and asks for a hug, and the little girl screams, "No, you killed me, Daddy." I honestly have no idea why the police brought in the girl. It's horrible. The 911 call from the attack of Travis the chimpanzee. Travis' screams can be heard in the background at the start of the tape as Harold, owner of Travis, pleads for the police, who initially believed the call to be a hoax until she said, "He's eating her." Remind me of a news story I had read. A teen went camping with her father, or stepfather, and they were attacked by a bear and her cubs. The bear left and came back while the teen was on the phone with her mom. The teen at one point said, "Mom, they're eating me." I cannot imagine how awful that must have been. The descriptions for the audio of this incident make it sound like the most disturbing. This entire thread I suspect was triggered by that event, which was mentioned in another, earlier submission. I'm not listening to any of them. The Apollo 1 crew. Those guys were the coolest, calmest, most extensively well-trained former combat/test fighter pilots in the world, and all they could do was scream. That audio kept me up the night I heard it the first time. I worked at the National Archives long ago and had access to the transcript, predictably mostly screaming. IRC. The document itself had an attachment saying the audio had been destroyed out of respect for the families. Though I had some doubt of that, only today, 20-odd years later, learning that wasn't true. This one is accompanied by video, but the reaction of a man whose wife gets killed and a brick flies off the back of a truck they were driving behind on a highway and came through their windshield. The audio was captured by their dash cam, one of those things you can't unhear. Yeah, this one is just straight depressing, extreme raw emotion of a sudden and violent loss of life. I can't even begin to imagine how traumatizing that is. I used to work at a hospital and I can never get the sounds of unbridled animalistic wailing out of my head. There's no sound like the sound of somebody's heart and soul shredded to pieces when they've lost their center. I still haven't heard this video and I don't want to because I still can't get the sounds of mothers screaming for their child or a husband for his dead wife out of my head. Jim Jones talking into a microphone while his followers poison their children. What made the death tape even more haunting was that because the tape had been used so many times to record stuff. Faint backward music is barely audible while Jones speaks, from the back tape. It makes the whole thing sound haunted. Which it pretty much is. Accompanied by video, but a lot of the school children who drowned on the MV Sewol recorded short video clips as the ship was sinking. Hearing the crew telling the students over loudspeaker to stay in place and stay on board is absolutely chilling. The children make snide remarks about how crazy it is to stay on board with the ship listing so far, but they remain in place. One of them literally jokes, "This is the part where they tell us everything's fine and we should stay put while they run for their lives," so fucked up that that's exactly what was happening. I remember watching these when it happened. Some students laughing and joking, others crying and trying to call their parents, some sat silently either awaiting rescue or death. Seeing them struggling to sit as the ship is sinking, struggling to stay out of the rising water, and the point where they start realizing they're doomed. Wasn't the best idea for 14-year-old me to watch. The voicemail my stepfather left my mom the morning of 9/11. He worked on the 99th floor, and called to tell us he was okay, and was making his way down the stairs. He said he would call us again when he was outside. He never did. In the call, you can hear him telling others to keep their heads down, out of the smoke, but what really makes the audio as disturbing as it is the screaming. The screams in the background are some of the most bone-chillingly real terror I think I've ever heard. The Golden State Killer phone tapes where he calls his victims for years after the crimes to taunt them always gives me chills. Even more terrifying is people who receive those calls could sometimes hear children on the other side of the phone, meaning the supposed killer taunting them was around children. Now that he's caught, it's crazy to think those were probably his kids or grandkids.